Get this right and you'll not only produce more content than ever, but you'll also be able to connect better with your audience, thereby enhancing your success on this platform. Have you ever felt that the process of setting up your studio is keeping you from consistently creating YouTube videos? In this video, we're joined by Kevin Shen, the founder of Dream Studio Course and a trusted consultant for some of the biggest creators on YouTube. He's made it his mission to ensure your studio works for you and not against you, enhancing your brand and speeding up the video making process. We're not talking about lighting or composition here. This is about the vibe you're creating in your content, the message you're sending through your backdrop, and how an efficient setup can make it a breeze to hit that record button often. I tried Kevin's approach myself after our call, and the difference is quite clear. In a few steps, my background transformed from this to this, and I don't think it's completely perfect just yet, but I think it's a huge difference, a major improvement from what I had before. So let's hear it from Kevin on how you can make this transformation too.
Hey
Kevin, how's it going?
Kevin has worked with countless creators to raise their background game and has an unmatched skill on helping creators to signal. Here's how I would personally describe signaling. If you think about it like this, you have a couple of random objects like a tree, some lights, some decorations, and individually they don't really mean anything to us, but if you put them all together, you get yourself a Christmas tree. It's no different really when it comes to our background on YouTube. We essentially need to effortlessly signal to our audience what it is that we are about, as it's so crucial to our branding. For example, can you guess what videos Charlie Marie makes just by looking at her background? If you guess web and graphic design videos, then you'd be right, because her background just matches that overall vibe due to the hand-drawn art mounted to the wall behind her. If we take a look at someone like Caleb Pike, he makes videos on how to use your camera better. He teaches, different lighting techniques, how to create better videos, and obviously he's signaling all of that with the different equipment and shadows that we see in his background. So what about this creator, Alex? He signals that he's someone that gets down and dirty in the kitchen, plus he has a ton of tools within his space that gives it that DIY vibe. It kind of has that Casey Neistat style to it, which is perfect for his channel because it's all about experimenting in the kitchen. You can basically see that people look before they listen, and that's why the first impression you give to a new viewer is important. Successful YouTubers know this, and that's why even though their backgrounds look kind of random at times, it's meticulously put together. No matter what stage you're at when it comes to creating on YouTube, whether you're a beginner or someone with 1 million subscribers, you should always aim to stand out, grab their attention, and give them a reason to trust you through the authority of your background. It basically just shows that you take this YouTube thing seriously and that you care about the quality of your videos. The first question I asked Kevin was, what are the core principles for a strong background on YouTube?
We start the process by going, what is the emotional payload? What is that emotional context that you want the person to be in when they're interacting with you? So based on your brand, based on what you want them to do and feel and what you want the ultimate outcome for that person, that transformation to be, once you have this kind of North Star, no matter where you are, you can always just navigate north, right? Colors, if you want the colors to feel super nurturing and super calm and comforting, you're not gonna pick this like bright, like neon green color probably, right? You're gonna go for more, maybe a softer gray or blue or a purple or something like that.
The North Star technique is a fantastic mental model for coming back to what truly matters when designing your background and how you want to appear to your audience. When I was working with Ali Abdaal as his full-time YouTube producer, we were very intentional about what was shown in the background when the new office was being created, because it simply had to reflect Ali's personality and overall vibe that he goes for on the channel. This wasn't always the case though, as when he first got started making videos back in the Cambridge days, the background was simply an extension of himself because he was living and making videos in the exact same place.
He was living there. So it was like the background was just an extension of himself. And I don't think at that time he was really thinking too much about it, especially not in the beginning. And over time, it sort of just merged into this thing where him and his background were just one and the same, because the personality is sort of what shines through in Ali's YouTube videos. And I think that background really reflects that. Whereas if you're someone who's coming into this, let's say as a cooking YouTube channel, but you'll know more for the recipes that you create rather than your personality, it's like the background's obviously going to be a kitchen, but how can you make that more unique to who you are? And because otherwise it just looks like a normal background, right, inside of a kitchen. And I just think that
if the more you can sort of be one and the same with your background, like you say, treat it like a character, I think that the more impactful and the more just authentic it feels between the creator and the audience.
So this is why it's important to think about what message you want to convey to your audience. You have to ask yourself, who is it you want to appear as, and be intentional about designing that vibe of your background to reflect you. In fact, in film theory, there is this fancy word called mise en scène, which I learned at university. And it's basically a French term used to describe the setting of a scene in a play or film. It refers to everything placed on the stage or in front of the camera, including people themselves and what they're wearing. It's basically what is the whole vibe of this scene. It's very, very methodical and thought out. And that's essentially what we're doing here by being intentional with our background. Now, this makes complete sense because the first question Kevin asks all of his clients is,
we say is like, what matters to you? What would success look like for you? And for some people, it looks very differently, right? Some people want it to be like, oh, I want it to be super fun and stuff. And like, I want people to feel energized. And we've worked with other people who are more like mellow and like they're like a therapist, and I want to create a safe place because we're talking about traumas here. We don't want to make him feel like, it's overly stimulating for these people.
Okay, so we now know that to become signaling masters, we need to think about building a world within our background. So I asked Kevin, what are the practical steps towards figuring out your background?
Where do you start? How do you know what to signal? Do you recommend that they research their competitors and write down the common items that frequently appear in their backgrounds? Like, what's the process there?
One thing again is like to kind of just like figure out from a human level, like why you're there for the person, because we could always kind of default to what are the experts telling us? Like, oh, you got to have YouTube face, you got to like do whatever it is. But everybody's different on YouTube. Everyone's different on whatever platforms. Just because it's a video medium doesn't mean every single video has to be the same vibe. So really thinking through what you need, how you need to show up for the person. I call it like, this is not my term obviously, but like with world building, right? Like if you go to a theater, oftentimes, like I personally will go watch a movie just because I want to be in that world. So every one of us is creating a world for the people that we're showing up for.
I think we can all relate to wanting to enter a world that we love within TV or film. For me, it would be like Harry Potter or Stranger Things. And so really we should be thinking about how you can build a world within your own videos by not only having a great background, but also by, the sound effects that you use and the music and your style of editing. How can you help to build this world that people want to be a part of? The combination of everything you use to world build will become your niche, and that's exactly how Kevin says we can occupy the mind of the viewers.
Right, like what is a niche and a personal monopoly, right? Like, and if you have this space that has your own look and it's just something that more people can't replicate, the more you have just placed in people's minds of like, oh, like this is the person that I can't wait to consume content from.
All right, so that's the world building stuff sorted. However, regardless of your niche, we need to know how we can signal to the viewer in any niche so that they can trust us to provide valuable content. Now, I've always liked the fact that different niches have different vibes on YouTube through their different signaling. So I asked Kevin, what makes for effective signaling in different niches? For example, what signals a gaming creator compared to a productivity creator?
The main thing to signal that I tell everybody is you want to signal that to the person that they're about to consume something of high value. And value looks very different in different niches, right? A gaming creator, you're waiting to be entertained, right? And so the fast cuts, like a bunch of stuff, loud things on screen, even the thumbnails look very, very different, right? Because you're signaling a different value inside that packaging. But for a productivity creator, you're kind of hoping that they will unearth some nugget that tickles your brain in a way that maybe you haven't thought of before, some new mental model or some new hack or something. And so you might want to signal that differently.
This is why value is demonstrated primarily by showing that you had to go through that extra effort to complete your background.
Showing intentionality, like signaling that, is different in every niche, but it boils down to I put in effort so that you don't have to. I am showing the person and making it obvious to the person that I went above and beyond to separate myself from what the average person who's not willing to put in these little pieces of effort and resources and time and money investment, something that they cannot replicate if they're being lazy.
That's why Kevin recommends that if you have two different design layouts that you can't choose between, you should always pick the hard one to signal more effort and therefore signal more value. Kevin's actually put together a Notion page that has some of the best backgrounds on YouTube, and you'll be able to find a link in the description below. So now that we have this huge library, we can go through it and we can basically reverse engineer other creators' backgrounds to find what works for you. Ask yourself, do I like plants? Do I like the dark and moody? Do I like the bright light and kind of colorful backgrounds? You know, what is the vibe that you're going for? Take down some notes and make a list. And that's going to really help you when it comes to creating your type of content. You know, for example, if you were a therapist or a self-care channel, you could take inspiration from HINDZ. And I looked at this, and to be honest, I think you can kind of get the vibe straight away. As you look at this frame, you instantly get the vibe that this is going to be a chill sit down video. But knowing what we know, we can kind of break down how he's signaling this. So firstly, there are obviously the colors. You know, he has sort of like this dark and earthy tone that he's going for. Obviously that gives like a very warm tone to this. I'm also not entirely sure how intentional he is with what he wears, but the blue shirt is quite a nice contrast that just really makes him pop off the center of this framing. And he also does other little subtle things here, like he has the wooden fire in the background. He also has like the little warm lamp. He's always holding like some green tea or something. It feels like you're literally in his house. And if you've watched him for a while, you'll obviously be connecting to his personality. You'll understand him, his story. And I just think that his background is going to kind of like add to this. It's going to make it feel familiar and safe, which is really what you want when you're talking about the topics that he covers. So just like this example, when you look at Kevin's library, your intuition is immediately going to tell you what you like and what you don't like. And that could be, you know, the space, the symmetry, the color, the light, the material. And so make sure, as I said before, to take these notes and apply it to your own space. So now that we have this list, I'm going to quickly whiz through some tips from one of Kevin's Twitter threads where he breaks down some easy things we can do to level up our immersion within your composition. Rule number 1 is proportions. Anna Akana does a very good job of this by spacing out the objects to help her create the feeling that there is a large world behind the screen, as Kevin mentioned earlier. I personally think that this is really cool as it kind of adds this depth and intrigue to that framing. You know, it doesn't even look kind of real, it just looks like a set in a movie. Rule number 2 is to avoid blank walls. Instead, what you'll want to do is to make the frame look a little bit more homely and just make it look like you're in your house. You know, I think that's the overall vibe that we want to go for. We don't want to look like we are, you know, in some corporate environment where it looks extra polished. You know, we want it to look natural. I actually think that Ali Abdaal is a great example of this because he's just filled his studio with items that signal, you know, this light and airy atmosphere. And it's, you know, it's the perfect space to do some productive thinking. He has like plants and books and the instruments, and we kind of get a vibe of who Ali is as a person because of this, and it's just so much better than a blank wall. Rule number 3 is layers. Kevin advises adding layers to give the background further depth, just like they do in masterclass courses. You can even add layers through your clothing to match your background like this. Rule number 4 is balance. This is obviously important because we just like things that looked balanced. It's why you see this type of composition in TV and movies all of the time. So now we know how to engineer great backgrounds. The next thing that Kevin talks about in his tweets is that you need to emphasize the art of looking like you belong on camera. All right, so when it comes to looking great on camera, a good chunk of it is about framing. Luckily, I've dissected even more of Kevin's tweet threads to give you some more golden rules. Firstly, we have the rule of 6. This basically is the fact that most backgrounds look lopsided like this. Instead, what you want to do is break up the sections into 6 frames. We can then occupy the middle 2, and we can fill the other 4 so it looks leveled like this. Rule number 2 is contrast. This can usually be done by contrasting our skin tones with the background. For example, you can have both warm and cool colors within a single frame, or you can even use things like your decor. Or you can create contrast by using light and dark areas like this. Kevin told me that most of our skin tones are shades of both yellow or orange. So a cooler colored background are usually a safer choice. So please keep that in mind when you're thinking about designing your background. The third rule is glare. Glares are the reflections that you get on your forehead or face due to harsh lighting, just like this. To avoid glare, you need to make sure that you have soft light by dimming your brightness or by lowering the camera contrast settings. The fourth rule, Kevin encourages people to ditch any filters that you might be applying to your videos. According According to him, it signals a cheap and lazy shot whilst telling your audience that you are embarrassed of your background. And to be honest, I have to say that I agree. I think that this just doesn't look good whenever I see it on Zoom or Google Meet. Rule number 5 is depth illusion, and this is a rule for all of the people out there who say that they don't have enough space to build a studio. Kevin challenges you here by saying,
there is no space that's too small, but a larger space is going to just be better. So it's not too small to ever get started. I'd say getting a camera and getting familiarized with that and understanding how to use the right camera settings, finding one that has a low F number. So a lens that shoots wide enough to give you like kind of this sense of perspective and can blur out the background a little bit. That plus honestly playing with lighting. More lights is better than more light, right? So when we're lighting things, some people think just like pump more light into the space, like more is better, but it's actually not more volume of light. That just makes things hot spotted and kind of ugly. You want more lights. So play with adding different lights into your space. Just get a lamp, put it around you in different angles, and you can kind of see how it changes. Right? Even up top, to do a quick demonstration, I have a light up top here. If I turn that off, the space and like the feel totally changes.
And if you've done all of this and you only have a small area where your background looks neat, then you can actually move your camera back and zoom in a little bit to make your decor look bigger, just like this. Now, I think it's important to say that all of these are obviously general rules. Your specific situation may vary. You might have different situations, and so you can just iterate really until you find the perfect setup for you. Kevin's final point really here is to just build an entire background and studio in place, you know, something where it's permanent. I think that this is the biggest takeaway for me. Building this space right now is just so much easier to be able to sit down and record videos as opposed to what it was in the past, where I'd have to constantly set up and dismantle my studio every time that I wanted to record a video. Just that the thought of that would put me off making videos, and obviously that's not what we want to be doing as YouTubers. We want to be releasing videos on a weekly basis, and so if you have to do that, it kind of means that you have to be creating and destroying your setup every single week to record that video, and that just seems like a nightmare, right? So trying to build something where you can have a nice background that's easy for you to record, I think is huge when it comes to trying to grow a YouTube channel. Plus, I've also had like a ton of compliments on video calls over the past couple of weeks since I've changed to this setup. If you'd actually, rather have someone like Kevin do this for you, you can join his course. And there's a link in the description below. And him and his team will basically look at your studio, look at your house, understand the vibe that you're going for, and just solve all of these problems for you so you don't have to do this yourself. Improving the quality of your background and making your studio permanent in your house, I think will have a huge impact on how people perceive you and the quantity of content you produce, all of which is going to help you build a strong audience. But to be honest, in my opinion, something that is way more important for getting views on YouTube are strong titles and thumbnails. If you want to see how the top YouTubers always get clicks, then you want to check out this video right here.